What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network. Today's going to be a little bit of a different video than you might be used to here. I am interviewing and talking with a fellow player, Patrick Wall, today. And what's special about Pat and why I wanted to bring him on to share some of his experiences and some of his new knowledge with you all is because Pat was not too long ago just a beginner player. Liking the Pokemon trading card game, having a love for Pokemon, but not really playing in a lot of tournaments, and with a goal of becoming a competitive player. And in this online era, that might be easier or more difficult for some people, and what a competitive player is might even be a skewed thing for people during the online era of Pokemon TCG. But Pat has hit what I think is kind of like the benchmark for being a competitive player right now, which is qualifying for a Players Cup. He recently qualified for Players Cup 4, and I've been lucky enough to have gotten to observe Pat a lot through his journey because I have been coaching him in Pokemon TCG since sometime last year. So today we'll be talking about how Pat started out as a Pokemon TCG player, where he was at the beginning of last year or whenever he restarted his journey last year, and some of his experiences along the way and how he persevered and grew and became a competitive player in this online era of the Pokemon trading card game. So, Pat, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Patrick Wall. I've been playing competitively, I guess, for somewhere around year and a half, 2 years. Mostly in the online era. I dabbled a little bit right before quarantine. Played a couple cups. I went to one regional, but really decided to start taking it more seriously during the pandemic, and yeah, just trying to get better.
Cool. So, let's start with exactly when did you start playing the Pokemon TCG? Because a lot of people will, start playing when they're a kid and then pick it up a decade later, or they never touch the game, but at 25 they start playing. So people's journeys look a lot different. So when did you start actually playing the Pokemon trading card game?
Yeah, so I first started playing base set. I was in middle school, and the very first iteration of the card games came out. So it was like the perfect age. I remember back in, I guess that was '96. I would go to like the local Toys R Us near my house, and they would do tournaments. This is the dark ages. Basically, there was no net decking, there was no buying cards online. It was kind of whatever you pulled out of a pack for the most part. And
Yeah.
so I brought my Alakazam Charmeleon deck to my to my local Toys R Us, and back then they were giving out the badges. So I had a couple like pin, boulder badges or whatever, and so I played that in middle school, and then fell off for a couple decades, and then got back into it around pretty much right around when Team Up came out. I dabbled on ptcgo for a little bit before that, um, and then yeah, really started actually playing and buying cards. Went to my first challenge in like August of 2019. So yeah, quite a bit of time in between there, but hopped
Right.
back on in the modern.
So when you came back, was it kind of like you were playing a whole different game, or did you like still bring any basics with you from back in the day?
Oh, it's wild because like I got back into it in my adulthood because I was just, you know, it's hard to believe now, but you used to be able to go to like a Walmart or a Target, and the cards would be in the like impulse buy section by the
Hmm.
by the checkout.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I haven't cracked a pack in 15, 20 years. I'd love to do that. So I bought a pack on impulse, and it was like one of those like third party sellers where there's like no code card, nothing good in it. Like my best card was like a Gumi
Yeah.
from a set that I already rotated. But I was like, oh, that was really fun. I wonder what the card game is up to. So I downloaded ptcgo, and I ran through the tutorial part, and
Hmm.
all those cards are old.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, the card game hasn't really changed that much. And then I hop on the ladder, and it's GXs and tag teams and all this. And it's like this is a little different.
Yeah. So, coming back into it in 2019, when did you I guess Team Up was I guess that was the beginning of 2019. Yeah. So when did you decide that you were going to be like serious about it and it wasn't just going to be picking up a game here and there, cracking a pack?
Yeah, well, when I realized that there were a couple local leagues near me, that was the big thing. Because it's all well and good to like collect, and a lot of people love collecting. I've gotten really a lot of enjoyment in the pandemic out of collecting, but for me, it was like it's finding the community, finding your local place, and really like growing that way.
Hmm.
So once I found, I live in South Philadelphia, so it was shout out Red Caps and the Garden. Once I found that there were a couple spots near me, that was when I was like, all right, I'll go to a couple like leagues. I'll go to a couple like Pokemon nights after work and just kind of like see what the deal is. And there's just such an awesome community in Philly and just around this area that I was like, you know what, I think I'll give it a shot. Like,
Hmm.
seems fun.
Awesome. Awesome. So so you start going to leagues and whatnot, and I think this will be really valuable if people are watching this video in like, I don't know, hopefully 6 months when people are regularly going to leagues and tournaments on the daily.
Yeah.
um I think that's when this will help people a lot. But so you started actually playing the game, going to leagues, going to a tournament here or there, having some friends that play. And plenty of people do that and never have, you know, aspirations of like being the next world champion or anything like that. But when did you decide that you had goals to become a competitive player and see success with the game?
So I have a little bit of an obsessive personality in that if I find something that I really enjoy, I want to go all the way with it.
Okay.
So whether that's like I've been playing drums for 20 years, so it's like, you know, I didn't really dabble in any other instruments. I was like, that's the one I want to play, and I'm going to get as good at it as I can. And I think once I really like fell in love with the Pokemon TCG, I was like, this is really fun. Events are super fun. You
Hmm.
get to meet all kinds of people from all over the world. Like, let's see how far we can take this. And you know, I don't mean to sound like I'm like going to worlds and doing all this crazy stuff yet, but like, I was like, yeah, we'll see what happens and just try to get better and um, play competitively. And it's like a fun challenge. I really think there's something really special and fun about um, the process of getting better. I think it's very natural and easy to kind of be like, I want to play for a couple months and then be incredible. But typically nothing in life works that way.
Yeah.
So I think you really have to find the steps that give you pride, even if they don't feel like big steps to everybody.
Hmm.
Where you can kind of look back like month to month or year to year and be like, wow, I really have come a long way. And
Hmm.
that's, I think, such a big part of life in general, but especially in this game where results are quantifiable. There is really something kind of cool to me about being able to do that consistently and like get better competitively.
Absolutely. So what were some of the first steps you made once you knew that you wanted to be a competitive player? We already know like league and tournament, so I guess after joining
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well, I think like early on, it's like for me, it was all about watching YouTube. It was
Mhm.
watching all these content creators. I watched a ton of your stuff when I was brand new. Um, just trying to get a sense of where everything was, and then I really to newer players, like really can't recommend enough trying to find your locals, whether it's like a Discord or a store, because it's one thing I think to watch videos, but to be able to talk it out with people.
Mhm.
Um, I back then especially, but even now, I ask a lot of stupid questions to a lot of people who know more than me. It's like, I was thinking about running this tech in this deck, and they'll say, no, that's really dumb because you can do this instead. Or just like having that sort of natural curiosity, I think is a big part of it. Um, but yeah, it was just a matter of I don't know, just trying to work to get better. I think I forgot what your question was.
The question was, what were the first steps you made towards being a competitive player, towards finding success? But that's something I think I've written about that on my Patreon before. What you were talking about, finding a group. I think I've covered that in some of my articles about like my journey to becoming a better player, because finding a group that is on the same level as you and also wants to commit time to it is really important. Now, of course, like there's a saying like try to be the worst in the room. Like, you want to surround yourself with people that are all better than you at whatever it is that you're doing. And there's definitely some merit to that, you know, finding connections with the better players in your area, or just, you know, you clicked with someone online, so maybe see if they have some advice to offer. But really finding a group of people with similar goals to you, and that are either as ambitious or more to learn and grow and do better than you, that's really big. And
Yeah, that's
also people
huge.
you get along with. And
Sure.
I since I'm from, you know, down the street in New Jersey from Philly, I know a lot of your crew, and they're they're kooky people, but they're easy to get along with.
It's on your Twitch, so I don't know if you want to trash them too hard.
Okay, so yeah, so the first step. So after finding a group that you could mesh with and talk to, and they would answer your quote dumb questions, what else were you doing? And when, kind of like how far down the line from team up coming out?
Yeah, so I would say once I started like buying physical cards and putting together decks, the first deck I ever built IRL was Greensguard, Greens Reshi. Um, and I think like I went to my first challenge, like my first IRL tournament of any kind in the modern era in like August 2019. And then I think less than a month later was AC Regionals, was the first regional of the year.
Yeah.
And I learned very quickly that I didn't know anything, that I really needed some help from outside. So I started looking for coaching. Um, and I started working with Carl Barone, who no longer plays, but used to contribute to Rare Candy.
That's
And he was
right.
very
I
generous
forgot
enough
that you were
to,
Carl's student. That's so
yeah,
sick. Yeah,
yep, the
Carl is
Guardian
great.
Master.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would have played Guardian at AC if my cards had arrived in time.
Uh
But yeah, I think especially early on, if you can afford it, and of course, not everybody has the time or the resources to do coaching, but if you do, um, it's really helpful, especially early, because there's so much to learn, but you also learn good habits.
mhm.
Again, it's like anything else in life that you're trying to get better at. Um, you want to learn the best habits you can early, and that's not to say that like you become, you know, you're not playing three-dimensional chess 2 weeks in, but just knowing like you don't always have to play that quick ball if you don't need it, or how to how to count prizes, even if it's in a very rudimentary way. That kind of stuff is foundational, and you can build on it, and that makes such a big difference later on. But yeah, for me, it was like all about finding. Like I think the way you said it is exactly right. Like find people who know more than you, have similar goals to you, and are willing to help. Because
Mhm.
that's not always the case. There are plenty of players, you know, like you can't just cold DM Azul or Tord and be like, hey, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
Like, that's a little unrealistic. But if you can find people around you who are willing to help, and a lot of that is coaching, um, that's just huge. And one of the awesome things about this community is like so many of the top players, you're a perfect example of this. Like so many of the top players do coaching.
Mhm.
It's not, I don't know how it is in other games. Like I don't play Magic, but I, I think that there's this awesome like the community is the size that it is, and that allows you to get the best info straight from the source. And like, I can't tell you how much just like getting your insight, even if it's not gameplay, just like talking out the meta or talking out ideas, like you'll find yourself learning so much if you have an open mind and are just talking to people who know more than you.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of like since you play drums, so to use a music analogy, it's kind of like how you're saying, like, you know, Tord offers coaching, right? And he's one of the best players of the modern era. That's like if, like, I don't know, somebody from the number one rock band gave $20 guitar lessons down the street from you. You know, like
Yeah,
you don't have that in a lot of other communities, or like, you know, Super Bowl quarterback giving lessons in the local field. You know, you don't have
right.
that kind of accessibility in other ways, but when you have it here in Pokemon, that literally the best players and some of the most knowledgeable people and people who have certain niches are giving coaching at fairly affordable rates and on the regular, it's something to take advantage of, I think. And I do think that most of the people that do coaching try to just charge like what they're worth, but keep it reasonable. You know, like I don't think anybody's out here just for the money, because they also want to see the game grow.
Yeah, and that's another really cool thing. This isn't just going to turn into me pumping you up, but like I think in your recent video, you said like, a big goal of yours is to grow the community. And again, I don't play a lot of other card games. I can't imagine there are a lot of Magic streamers who are like, what I really want to do is grow this enormous community. Like, there is something really special about Pokemon right now, where like there is this, there's like a pride in playing, and there's a pride in the community and helping it like get to where I think a lot of us feel like it could be.
Hmm.
And a lot of that comes into coaching, and it's just like, I don't know, it's really cool. So if you can make coaching happen for you, whether it's the top of the best players in the whole world, or if there's a really good player who's done well at a few regionals near you and like is affordable, just having an open mind and learning from people who are more experienced is huge.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, so when did we start coaching together? I want to
Uh,
say was it before POG 2020 last year?
it was. I remember one of our first coaching sessions. I printed out Centiskorch VMAX proxies.
Okay.
So I guess like
So it was
almost
like
exactly a year ago.
so it was like July or August
Mhm.
2020 probably. So
Yeah.
whereabout were you then in terms of, excuse me, performance in tournaments or like skill level? Like where were you then?
So I was actually I had played online, or actually I had played IRL for a while during the like tag team era. Um, when Sword and Shield came out, I played for like a month or two, and then I kind of stopped around like January, February 2020 because I was getting frustrated.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I was improving at the level I wanted, and other life stuff was coming up, and it just felt like an
Yeah,
easy
and that's
thing to.
just about when the pandemic happened too. It happened
Yeah,
like right after the first Sword and Shield official tournament, I think.
yeah. So I missed the entire Rebel Clash meta, and I came back like right as Darkness Ablaze was about to come out,
Hmm.
and I was like, you know what? I have all this free time. I really like. I kept thinking about it. Kept thinking about them, thinking about the game, and I was like, I'll come back. So yeah, I started playing. I guess I kind of like caught the very beginning of the online meta, like the Battlefy days and all that stuff.
Hmm. Yeah. So what how would you have described yourself as a player in July or August when you came back?
Uh, Thought I knew more than I did.
Okay.
Like fine. Um, like probably like an easy win for someone going 1-1 in a tournament. You know,
Got it.
like I probably could have broken. I probably could have broken 500 at a few tournaments and like been pretty happy with that.
Okay.
But I wasn't a threat to anybody really.
Got it. Got it. Um and so tell me about some of the things that you learned that, or some of the things that helped you progress. So you weren't a threat to anyone in July or August of last year, but since then, you've topped some online tournaments, you qualified for Players Cup 4. So what were some of the first things that started helping you build the foundation of becoming a solid player?
Yeah, I'd say one of the big things was kind of learning the numbers game within the game. I remember I remember in one of our coaching sessions you brought up like, think about, for example, if you need a card off of a Marnie versus a stamp, think about how many cards you're going to draw and what the odds are that you're going to hit the card that you need.
Hmm.
Um, my brain doesn't normally work that way, so I don't think about things that analytically.
Yeah.
So when I learned that, that felt like the game opened up at that point. That was like a kind of a revelatory thing to start thinking about as far as counting cards, thinking about the math, like sort of the game within the game,
Yeah.
trying to remove luck as much as you can and make smart decisions based on numbers and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, to me, that's when I started really thinking about the game in a different way beyond like, oh, I can play this cherish ball to get this dead card out of my hand because I'm going to research and I don't need it. Like
Yeah.
that's definitely its own level that I
Yeah.
was not at. But the next level was definitely like, you know, that meme of the woman with the like stats floating around her head. It was like,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I remember the session where it was, I think the exact scenario we were talking about was kind of something that's like it happens in every game today, but it was new because of Darkness Ablaze. Was like the order and the thinning your hand for the Crobat the Dene research combo. Like, how can I draw 19 cards here? You know, so Crobat the Dene research, and talking about how I remember this session because you stopped like to take notes and write down what I was saying, because this was so like, because it really opened your mind to a different way of thinking about the game that I was just talking about naturally. Like, this wasn't even what I planned on teaching you that day, but like I was just naturally talking about the game, how I think about it, and it was a way that you hadn't started thinking yet, so it kind of opened your mind to like, when, because you asked me, well, how did you just look at your opening 7 card hand and know I can draw 19 cards this turn, you know? So talking about that, and also a lot of it when we get back to IRL will be kind of like muscle memory, but like not really equation memory, but more like a template to how turns will go if your hand is going one way. So you don't have to sit there and do the math every single time. Like, after a while of repetition, it becomes natural to you, and you know, okay, I'm going to do this, 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 so I can do this. Um, and I think a lot of it was built upon what we talked about in that session that day, like you said.
Yeah, huge. And also, you mentioned that I was taking notes. I should one day I should show you the number of notes I have in my notes app for my session. If you do coaching, take notes. You're paying for that time. Take
Absolutely,
those
yeah.
notes, look at them after the session, keep them handy with you when you're playing a tournament. That stuff, that's the little stuff that can, especially if you're newer, that's the stuff that I feel like really makes a difference.
Yeah, yeah. Not to focus too much on coaching, since I do want to focus
Hey,
on Pat, but if you're coaching, from my therapy background, in therapy, you know, your therapist or your counselor or your psychologist isn't fixing you. They're giving you the tools to help you help yourself. And they're there just to kind of guide you through your journey. And I think that's perfectly how I coach in Pokemon TCG. Maybe not everybody does, but that's how I think is the most successful and productive way, because you shouldn't treat your coach like they are just handing you, you know, the keys to success. You have to do things like Pat did, like taking notes and practicing the things that the coach talked about after the session. Because you know, the session doesn't really end when the session ends. It just restarts again next week, and you work on the things that you've been practicing all week. So basically, make sure you're putting in, you know, 2 times the effort that you hope your coach is putting in, because that really makes a difference.
and it's the kind of thing too where like if you're really only getting coached or thinking about that stuff in the session,
Mm-hmm.
the next time you play in a tournament, it's gone.
Yeah, yeah,
Then what was the
exactly.
point?
Yeah, because I've definitely seen people in Pokemon coaching, or even like in music, um, that don't practice between the sessions, or don't actively think about it between the sessions, or, you know, they kind of sit down, pay the coach or the tutor or the teacher, and expect everything to just fly by because they paid the money. But really, it's you're hiring like a guide to help you do it yourself. So when did you feel that you started improving? What were some tangible things or measurable things that you saw that you were
I
improving
stopped
with?
playing ADP. um, I don't know. I think one of the first things, I'm joking, but I'm also not joking, because I think like when I first started playing, I would pick a deck, and it's the only deck I would play, and um, I didn't learn enough. Um, when I remember early on the online era, I would get tilted at a tournament because I'd go 4-5 or whatever and be like, I feel like I'm better than this. And my friends, again, that's why it's good to have people you can talk to. They'd be like, yeah, put down the same deck and try something else. And you learn and you realize that, like, I learned a certain set of skills that are required for one archetype or one deck, but there are so many other things out there that I just didn't pick up because you're not trying different variations of decks or ideas or themes or um, and I think once I sort of opened my mind to that and like was more willing to suck at a deck for a couple of weeks if it meant learning something valuable that is transferable past rotation even, um, that felt like a big step as well.
Yeah, and this one is another one of those things that like sounds obvious to the people that have been playing for a while, but if you play all the decks, you'll also know how to play against those decks. Like knowing, like you said, you only play ADPZ. And so you might not know, well, what does a Scorch's typical hand look like when they only have 4 cards in hand? Like, is that something I want a Marnie or reset stamp? Is that somewhere where I want a boss stall because I dead drew for a turn? What does it look like when Dragapult does this? Like, what's probably going on in their hand? You might have glanced at a deck list a few times, but if you haven't piloted the deck or piloted decks very similar to it, you might not know what's happening next turn or the odds of your opponent having what they need or having what or not having what they need, so you can like lock them for a turn. That all comes into play, and you learn those things just by playing a handful of games with each deck.
And that's one of those things that I think becomes even more valuable when IRL comes back, because I think the open deck list thing is nice for the online era, but I do feel like there's going to be a not small number of people who are going to be completely thrown when they just can't look at a deck list. And so knowing what a deck can do or has in it, um, because you've played it, I think is kind of like an X factor in a matchup, especially again if you're a newer player.
Yeah, that's I think that's one of the things that have frustrated me during the online play. Now, I love open deck lists because there are skillful things that you can do because of open deck lists, but I think those have a lower skill floor to do. More people can look at the deck list and then decide to play in a certain way, whereas I think people at towards the top level of players in a real life tournament where you don't know what your opponent has, once you start seeing a few cards, you can construct that deck in your head and know the possible text to look out for. And okay, well, since they're playing this, they're probably not playing this. And not being able to express that skill has been a big thing for me during online tournaments. And I think that will be a huge skill gap when we come back, and definitely a reason to be playing more decks and to be taking in more content and to be practicing more once real life events are back. So that's a great point you brought up, Pat.
And I think there's just such a big difference between knowing what's in a deck and playing the deck and understanding not only like what they're trying to do on an ideal turn, but how they pivot out of a not so ideal turn. Um, and that I think a lot of that can really only come from trying different stuff. Like you can watch all the YouTube videos in the world, but yeah, there's just no substitute for trying different stuff. And it's so easy to get um, locked into one deck, especially if it's a deck you love. Like I loved Guardian. That was like my pet deck forever. Um, but as a consequence, I didn't really learn how to play any other decks in that meta. Um, so there are still like Tempo Zard is still kind of a blind spot for me. I never learned how to play Ability Zard. I never really learned how to play most of the Mewtwo variants until recently. Um, and that kind of stuff can hinder your development because Mewtwo, I think, is such a it's such a like a blank canvas almost because of the number of cards you can throw into it that
Yeah.
I think about, and I really wish I had learned how to play that deck, even though it was hard and I was intimidated by it
Yeah.
because there's so much you can learn from it. So I would really advise, like, if you can, try to just learn as many archetypes as you can.
Yeah, that's really good advice because like um as a lot of the viewers might know on this channel, my mom plays Pokemon cards, and she's kind of like my first coaching student before I really started coaching, because she's been playing with me since I was a kid, but she never really wanted to get better until a few years ago. Um, and something she would do that kept her kind of at the, you know, the not making day two, or the just getting CP, or the top eight but then losing kind of skill level, was she would stick to one deck. And a lot of that is because, she's a teacher, she has, she's an adult, she does other things she didn't have time to, but during the pandemic she had time to really branch out with her decks and just sit down and play like 5 different decks in a day. And I saw that firsthand really help her, because now she knows what other decks are going to do and she can play around that, and etc. And that, something that I've seen Pat do as well.
It doesn't mean that you have to be like incredible with a deck,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
even just having a rudimentary understanding of what a hand looks like, 3 prizes in or something can just be huge.
Yep, for sure. And also that means when a good new deck pops up 3 days before the tournament, you're not completely lost. Like, you can say, "Oh, okay, it's kind of like this deck and it's kind of like this deck, so I pretty much know what to do."
That's been one of the kind of fun things about like, so the new Rayquaza VMAX just came out and everyone's talking about Ray Eels. It's like, obviously I wasn't playing in that era, but if you played Ray Eels a lot back in the day, you're probably going to hit the ground running when that deck comes out.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. The same with like the Urshifu Chinchino deck that I've been playing a lot. If you played Zorak Golisopod, a lot of top players have just been, playing that deck because it has a few similarities to a favorite top level deck from a few years ago. So that does happen a lot, and whenever that happens, you can kind of like borrow knowledge from past things that you did, and it saves you time in the future when you're trying to learn a new deck. So the last question I had for you, what were there any obstacles or mental barriers that you had to get over between starting your journey and now that you qualified for PC4, you've topped some events, you know what you're doing, you're ready to go to regionals and start, you know, uh, expecting better results and trying to get to day twos and stuff like that. So, were there any mental barriers or obstacles to get over?
Yeah, for sure. I don't think they're anything special. Frustration with my progress was probably the number one thing. Just feeling like I wasn't improving it. Like I didn't feel like the time I was putting in was equaling the amount I was getting better. And I did find that when I actually applied a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, it made a difference. Um, for Players Cup, was kind of all of those things. I put down ADP after like 10 keys of not going well, and I watched your first like what are people doing well with, and I switched to E-turn and finished with 109 rep. But
Yeah, and you ended up being in my next like top
proudest moment to date.
being in the top decks from Players Cup 4 video. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I'm very proud of that. But no, I think just like feeling like you're not getting better or tilt if a tournament doesn't go your way and feeling like why even play this game, like that kind of stuff is very easy to creep on you. Especially early on when I was still kind of steadily getting better, but wasn't. I mean, I don't know if I'd call myself good now, but I definitely wasn't good then. Um, and I remember complaining on Twitter, which don't ever do that. It's never good. But I remember complaining like, man, these kids are out here like kicking my butt, and I've been playing this long. I'm 30-year-old man, and I can't even beat these teams. And the great Xander Puro is like, yeah, because those kids have been playing for twice as long as you. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to that tweet and store that in my memory. That's a very good point. Um, but I think in general, just like frustration is such an easy, it's such an easy thing to feel, especially early in your journey.
Oh yeah.
And it can feel really insurmountable if it stacks on top of itself,
Yeah. I
which can
think
be mental, but like,
I think the middle part of the progress is what you really, that's the hump. Cuz like when you're when you first started doing coaching with me, and like you said, the numbers game, as you call it, like your mind opened up and you're like, wow, I'm like instantly able to do some better things now with my game. And then like you learned a new deck and wow, I can do this now. But then, 3 months later, you're just grinding tournaments and you're like, well, I'm not learning anything new. I'm not getting better. I'm still getting the same record. And once you get to the middle portion, I think your progress is such a little bit at a time, and you were used to those big strides in the beginning. Am I kind of accurate there?
That's exactly. I was kind of hoping you would crystallize it for me. I think that's exactly it. Because it's such a it's such an energizing feeling to feel like you're getting a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
And when you just keep getting a lot better, you're like, well, why wouldn't I just keep on this trajectory? But
Mm-hmm.
that's not how it works. So
Right. As you get higher up and higher up, there's such minute things, and um, it gets even harder to get better once you are at like kind of that mid stage, because it's frustrating when you don't have those sizable rewards that are showing that you're growing.
yeah, and I think one of the things that I did when I was in that stage, I'm getting getting the shakes just thinking about that feeling because it is such a horrible feeling. Like I think one of the things that I did that was really helpful for me was like if a content creator or a streamer was playing a deck, you do like in football they call it mental reps, where it's like if you're not on the field, you're watching who is on the field and being like, well, here's what I would do in this situation. So like watching a deck profile video, like some gameplay, and be like, all right, well, what would I do here? And see what they do, and see if you can figure out, why they did it if they don't already explain it, or ask if it's a stream. Um, that kind of stuff. I feel like it's like little things like that to me that I mean, you can just there's just always new things to learn, even if it doesn't feel like it's huge. But stuff like that I find really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And so something I remember from, I feel like right before you started getting into like top 16s of tournaments, or like getting into an invitational in one of the online circuits, things like that. And we would message back and forth during the period where you were getting a little more frustrated, and you're like, I've been practicing a lot, but I'm still going 4-3, or I'm losing the winning in, things like that. And some of the things that I remember saying were like, everybody loses winning in, like Tord Reklev loses winning ends. But also focus on each game one at a time, not your entire record. And also take each game for what it is, like I played the first 3 rounds of the Limitless series yesterday because I dropped after round 3. But round 3 was the best game I have played in maybe months, against Pedro Torres in the Urshifu Chinchino mirror. And I was happy about that game no matter which way it went, because it was a true game of Pokemon cards. And it was myself versus a very good player. And I was, I probably learned things in that game. And uh yeah, I think just like looking for those moments and growing on them, and because it's never your last tournament if you don't want it to be. Like, you go to a regional or you go to an IC and you don't do well, you can either quit Pokemon or take all the things you learned from that and take it into the next tournament.
And that's yeah, and that's a skill that doesn't, I think, like it shows up in shades in other parts of your life. But if you don't play sports or you don't do anything like that, that sort of feeling I think is can be unfamiliar and scary or intimidating. So I think so thank you for your patience while I'm just like molding in your DMs about going 4-3 in a Hikester. But
No, that's what I'm here for.
I think, oh, you poor guy. But no, I think there's something really something worth remembering in those moments is just, like I think it's exactly what you said. It's like, well, um, all right, you lost. How could you have won?
Hmm.
How do you around both in the game and then outside the game? Like, how do you take that loss and get better? How do you take that win and get better?
And sometimes it's going to be something frustrating, like I dead drew and couldn't do anything, but there are, there's so many times, and I'll point this out whenever I can when it happens in a stream of mine where I'm dead drawing, but there's still like one decision to make, and that one decision can decide if you can come back into the game on the next turn. Like, I posted a Pika ROM puzzle on Twitter months ago, and it was just a simple picture of like a pretty poor start Pika ROM where you have energy and a Pika ROM and no other Pokemon, and it's like, what do you do? And I think 95% of people would have attached energy, pass, and mauled over it, but there was a lot of discussion. There was discussion in the Twitter thread. There were people that retweeted, and then that was new discussion. There was discussion in group chats, like just about that one, do I attach this lightning energy? And that's something that most people, while dead drawing, wouldn't think of, because they let their mental get the best of them, and they frustrate and they attach pass and don't think about, or they don't attach the big charm or the air balloon, or do you attach it, do you play the stadium, etc. Some of these seemingly pointless things, just to touch on what the frustration does. And also, because I was going to say, sometimes you do just draw a hand where you cannot play a single card, you cannot do a single action, and then you lose. And those are things that are going to happen, like you were saying in sports. Sometimes in sports, your teammate is going to really mess up and you couldn't control that. Sometimes in music, a cable's going to come out, or the lights go off, or the power, or whatever it is, and those are some things that are out of your control. And whatever it is that you're doing, there are things out of your control. So what I suggest is that you do the best at the things that are in your control.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback off of that, one thing I've also noticed with the online era, I think it's a lot easier to kind of like half play games because it's on your computer. You can just sort of like mindlessly click. Um, I find that I am very guilty of that, especially like on the ladder when I'm just like trying to get coins or whatever. Um, Especially like where I'm at now, I feel like when I just sort of like mindlessly play games, I don't get anything out of that. But when I eliminate distractions, and I do this for Players Cup, it's like when you focus on the game, you play better. And that sounds
Yeah.
obvious, but it's so easy to just be sitting on your laptop, like watching TV, petting the dog, and just kind of like, yeah, quick ball for whatever. But um, so like to get better, I found that I really had to like stop what I was doing and try.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Pat, thank you for being on the channel. It
Thanks for
was
having me, man.
it was cool to have you on. I don't think I've ever done this with, somebody that is a coaching client, and that I've gotten to see your progression and your journey from a different lens, and also hear your take on all of it.
Well, that means a lot, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. Was there anything that we missed that you wanted to touch on?
I don't think so. I just hope this is helpful. I don't pretend to be the world's best player or even, near the top tier of players, but I hope that if you're new to the game, you stick with it. It's so much fun. The community is awesome. Find your people. Just like find some discords. Join Celio's Discord. Hop on Twitter. Ask questions. I find that the game is just so much more fun when you're a part of the community, especially when you're new, because you'll find people and it'll be a lot more fun.
Absolutely, man. All right, do you have any shout outs?
Yeah, shout out to my locals, especially Ed, Vinny, John, Sleepy Droopy. Check out his channel.
Oh, I didn't
Um,
realize Sleepy was one of your locals. I didn't
yeah,
realize that.
I, I lost to him at a cup once. Um, yeah, shout out to the Garden and Red Caps. Um, I'm team member 87 on Twitter if you want to say hi, or compliment my hair. And if you like indie music, my band is called Queen of Jeans. We're a Philly band. We tour nationally a lot when tours are things that can happen. We got some stuff coming up in later part of the year if you like live music.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for being here. And I hope everybody watching enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments for either me or Pat about the game, getting into it, anything like that, this channel will be doing a lot of that kind of content, especially when official events are announced again from TPCI. But other than that, stay tuned for my daily Pokemon TCG content and be sure to subscribe to the channel. And also a shout out to my sponsor, PoTownStore.com, the best place to get ptcgo codes. And be sure to use code CELIO for 5% off. With all that being said, thank you for being here again, Pat, and everyone watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.